You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Cyberspace, the new frontier. These are the voyages of the podcast First Contact. Its mission? To explore every episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. To seek out new viewers and have new conversations. To boldly view what many have viewed before. Welcome to podcast. Say something about the format here. I'm insert name.
And press any key.
Clear cache.
This week we have been watching Samaritan Snare. It first aired the week of May 15th, 1989. It was written by Robert L. McCulloch and directed by Les Landau. James, what happened in this episode?
Wesley prepares to go to a starbase to take some Starfleet exams when he's surprised to be joined by Picard, who needs to get some maintenance on his artificial heart, and he doesn't want anyone in the crew to know. Meanwhile on the Enterprise, Riker proves himself to be the most inept captain in the world when he allows Geordi to be kidnapped by some idiots, despite being warned by Troy that they're bad guys. They save him with some clever chat, then rush to the starbase to save Picard, whose operation has gone badly, and Pulaski is the only doctor in the quadrant who can save him. And she does.
Well, we've seen some groundbreaking episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation this season. The Measure of a Man, one of the all-time greats of Star Trek. And are we seeing another here? Alex, you've never seen it before. What did you think?
Allow me to compose my thoughts on the episode at the pace of the episode. You might want to play some light music. It's yeah, it was watchable.
Right, that's not a lot of feedback there.
Look, I'm sick of saying on these, it was basically fine. So I'll try and be a little more interesting.
But was this basically fine? This was pretty terrible, I thought.
It sort of was, yes. And yet I kind of enjoyed bits of it. But it could have easily been done in a quarter of the time.
I think we can say that there are two distinct plots in this episode. We have the one strand with Picard and Wesley on a shuttle, and another with Riker taking command of the Enterprise and showing what a fine captain he would be. You can see why he keeps getting offered these ships. Let's deal with the first one first. So Wesley's off to take some more exams. This one's not to get into Starfleet Academy, but just to make sure he can stay on the Enterprise, when previously he didn't need to do any exams to be on the Enterprise.
So these aren't the exams that he did last time and failed?
No, these are different exams that he's doing, because this isn't to get into Starfleet Academy, it's just so he can continue on the Enterprise.
And he didn't fail those exams. Didn't he get like a record test score on them, except that other guy, that weird funny alien guy, he got an even better score?
Which says to me that it's a very unfair system, really. You know, only one can get in, but I was the second highest ever. Yeah, well, you know, one place, you know how it is.
Which I think we went over and over when we reviewed that episode.
It doesn't really matter. It's an excuse to get Wesley on the shuttle. And then we find out Picard has an artificial heart as well, and he doesn't want to have the ship's medical personnel doing any operations on him. What do you think of that? His pride showing through, I suppose.
What was that whole thing about it would be inappropriate for you? Is it just because she's a friend? I mean, in a loose sense of the word? Or are they trying to hint at something far more grisly?
I thought what they were trying to hint at is that he's the captain and should be infallible, and therefore he doesn't want the crew to see any sign of weakness in him, be that physical or mental. What would Picard do? Oh, Picard would need a heart operation. He doesn't want them to start thinking that. They still want to think, walk in confidently and then tell people to do stuff.
So it wouldn't, say, be due to the part originally being written for Dr. Crusher before Gates McFadden left for her own physical and mental reasons?
I don't think so. I think we're that far into the season that wouldn't have come up.
The part does seem as if it's written for Dr. Crusher.
It absolutely does, because I think there's a kind of family dynamic. I think there are sort of implications that, Picard is Wesley's father. He's got this mysterious past with Crusher, and she's in love with him that he doesn't know. And this whole shuttle trip is sort of a father-son bonding type thing, or Picard certainly acting as a sort of father figure. Eat your sandwiches, Wesley. Okay. There is that, and yeah, it would have made so much more sense if Crusher had been there, and certainly Picard not wanting Crusher to see him that way. That absolutely makes sense. But here it's just a bit weird, yeah.
It is a remarkably awkward conversation aboard that shuttle, isn't it? Wesley, would you like a drink? No, thank you, sir. How about a sandwich? No, I'm fine, sir. Would you like to watch some hot man-on-man action on the view screen? What was that? Oh, nothing.
Wesley does play that part of an annoying passenger incredibly well, just asking all these hideously inappropriate questions. Why aren't you married? Why don't you have children? I think you'd make a good dad. Oh, what a horrible character. No wonder everyone hates him.
It's a shame you don't like kids. You'd have made a great dad. Well, actually, Wesley, I'm sterile. You insensitive prick.
In the hands of a competent writer and the hands of competent script editors, the idea of Wesley and Picard being stuck together and having to bond would actually be a pretty good plot. It's almost as if there's a later episode in which the exact same thing happens, which is superb. But who knows?
It's all a bit on the nose. It's, we want Picard to reveal some stuff about his past, and that's good, that's interesting. We want to know more about this character, but it's just like, basically, Wesley, ask the most obvious question. Let's really get deep into his psychology. It's just, no, tell me about your artificial heart. Tell me the story of how that came to be. And there's some great stuff in there, because Patrick Stewart is marvellous. His bits are great, but Wesley is so underwritten or just miswritten.
I mean, it's not awful. I mean, the device to have them together is perfectly fine. It's a typical sitcom device, really. And as you say, Picard's bits are perfectly fine. They're all good. It's just that the linking material between the good bits is, as you say, isn't strong enough, and it makes the thing drag hideously. And when is this the A plot or the B plot? Whichever one it is, while the other plot is going on with not a great deal happening, it just makes it all slow to a halt.
The other thing which bothered me, and this is probably a kind of ridiculous geeky thing, because as we've said, the device, get them on the shuttlecraft, get them bonding. 5 hours on a shuttlecraft at Impulse, could the Enterprise not have done that in about a minute? Could they have just dropped them off and then gone on its merry way? They don't have to be anywhere fast. They're mapping a pulsar cluster. But no, they can get called away and go and faff about on a rescue mission. I mean, does the Enterprise ever get to its missions? It always seems to get some kind of distress call. It's a bit formatty. That's just a geeky point. That's not one you'd think about when watching it. It's just afterwards and when you know Star Trek.
Well, it is strange that they haven't thought, oh, let's give the shuttlecraft's warp drive yet.
I guess there's still a bit of an implication that, warp drive is quite complicated and needs, a big, massive engine, which is totally contradicted by something like First Contact, where you can see a tiny shuttle kind of a warp drive. So I don't know what I'm thinking at all. But yeah, clearly, shuttles in the past of Star Trek, in its own continuity, have had warp drive. So why they don't now makes absolutely no sense, other than a reason for people to sit together and discuss their feelings.
But it's not even a reason there, because they could have just said, oh, they're 10 hours away at warp 4 on a shuttlecraft, and then there you go, that's sorted.
At which point I would question the entire starbase system and say it's quite insufficient. And once again, a starbase, turns out it's a planet.
Yeah, I did think that when I saw it. I thought, shouldn't this be in space?
Yeah, it turns out starbases are not starbases, but in fact are just colonies? What's the distinction?
Well, more than that, they're reused map paintings, aren't they, if I'm not very much mistaken?
They are definitely reused map paintings, yeah. It doesn't seem to be a starbase. I mean, maybe it's a different planet and it's basically like an embassy that Starfleet have, or maybe it just really doesn't matter and I'm kind of overthinking that kind of thing.
Maybe the money ran out.
Well, they spent it all on that horse and pen pals.
But we did have the really interesting revelation about how Picard got his artificial heart.
What now? I looked after I saw the episode at just some basic comments online, and I saw people saying, "Oh well, this episode, of course, has some great character development for Picard," and I just want to throw it out there. Was it? I mean, I enjoyed it, but was it great character development?
You're seeing it from the perspective of somebody who doesn't realise that there's an entire episode based around Picard getting stabbed by a Nausicaan in a fight.
I think this is a kind of a defining moment in Picard's past, and I think the character development is actually that we see Picard is an extremely measured and extremely thoughtful and extremely intelligent individual, and the revelation that he was an absolute tearaway at the Academy, and that's basically in complete contrast to Kirk, who it was said was a complete bookworm at the Academy and then later on went to be this bold leader who likes to take his shirt off and shag the alien's girlfriend and punch things. So I think it's a sort of quite interesting contrast there, where you might have always thought of Picard as kind of the intelligent, thoughtful type, whereas actually you find out he has more to him than meets the eye.
No, fair enough. I don't know whether it's just that because I'm not looking at it with the retrospective eye or not. I don't know. I mean, I take on board all of the points about Picard having changed his ways since his stabbing, but it struck me more as, oh, that's interesting, rather than, well, that's a fantastic bit of development there. Bravo. Yeah, nice.
I don't know if this is a moment that improves because of what happens later on, but I do think that is one of the best performed soliloquies, I suppose it is, in Star Trek so far. I mean, he's a class act. I don't know if that dialogue is anything particularly special, but the delivery is wonderful, and it does seem particularly significant. But I don't know if I buy that he would just suddenly open up to Wesley like this. I don't know why, when he's quite a guarded character, why he would reveal something like this to someone so annoying.
I think they sort of play at the fringes of why he does it, and they sort of suggest it's for the betterment of Wesley, with the whole, did you read the book I gave you? Well, it was a bit difficult. All the pages were stuck together and there weren't many words. It was just a lot of pictures. I know, it's good, isn't it? Do you like the way that it opened automatically onto page 45?
I suppose, since the episode is titled Samaritan Snare, that the Samaritan plot is the A-plot. The Enterprise goes to help some people in distress. Some people who are written, I would say, questionably. We can get into that later on, but Alex, what do you think overall of that other plot, Riker in charge and proving himself to be an absolute idiot?
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I kind of enjoyed this part. Shamefully.
That's fine. All opinions are welcome. They're not necessarily valid, but they're definitely to be heard. Why did you enjoy this part? What did you like about it? Which sounds like a horribly childish question.
I think what I enjoyed was just the sheer incompetence of the Enterprise crew against this group of idiots, really, who in the end proved we are smarter than you.
Yeah, to get as far as they did, I think definitely says that the main bridge crew of the Enterprise are the stupidest people imaginable, led by Riker, and who received warnings from his chief of security to say, do you need to send across the chief engineer to this broken down ship? The chief engineer? And Riker's like, of course we do. And every week we say this. Oh, they've sent across the one-of-a-kind android, the head of security, and the chief engineer. What could possibly go wrong in this very dangerous mission? As it turns out every week, nothing. But it was a valid question by Worf, and also maybe Riker should listen. And maybe you should never send one person alone to an unknown alien ship. Maybe a security detail should go. But is this just part of the sort of symptomatic of Gene Roddenberry's insane vision of the future, where he basically thinks that humanity is all good and trusting and no one can possibly see anything bad coming? Like, basically, are they just remarkably naive about everything, despite all the wars that have gone on in the universe with the Klingons and the Romulans in the last 100 years?
Or is it just another edition in Everybody Hates Troy?
It does come across as terrible writing in that these questions were brought up and they were not answered, and the answers could be so simple. You could come up with an answer for every single question that's brought up in this episode and brush it under the carpet, and then it's no longer a plot hole. Worf says, why send over our chief engineer? Riker could just say, well, we want her over quickly so we can get back to mapping the star or whatever they were going to do.
Yeah. Or Geordi is a specialist in this kind of system. Something like that.
I do love the way the writer has realised the issues as they've gone, and so has flagged them up in the script for all to see without thinking through an answer.
And Troy as well, essentially saying, these guys are the bad guys. They have an agenda. I can tell this. And Riker just going, nonsense. They are too simple. Okay.
Troy is actually useful for once, and she's ignored.
But is that just a symptom of her having been useless up to this point, so no one really trusts her judgment? It's just, yeah, whatever, Troy. Yeah, let's move on.
I mean, there's not much to say on this element of the plot, really, is there? I enjoyed parts of it from a sheer comedic point of view, not necessarily on the level I was supposed to, I grant you. Again, kind of like the B-plot. Not a great deal happens here, really. It takes a really long time for them to play their hand, and once they do, it sort of just speeds through very quickly, despite the fact that not a lot happens when they do play their hand. And in fact, it plays to a resolution that just makes you sort of turn around and go, what?
The whole thing with them doing double talk and giving Geordi lots of hints about what he has to do. Now, I think that's only clever from an audience perspective if there's a payoff that you can understand. And there isn't one. It's just, as like, you're saying stuff, I know that's important to Geordi, and then you do a thing that doesn't make any sense to me, and then you say, lucky you did that, and they go, yeah! And it's just the worst kind of technobabble, because it's made up technobabble, and then it leads to nowhere and nothing that I get from it as an audience member. It's just nonsense, and it's sort of a waste of time, and it's also a total rip-off of an original series idea, which was done much better then. So Geordi ended up disabling their torpedoes, but why did he need to do that at all?
Yeah, why did he have to make them to start with? I mean, surely they weren't intelligent enough to realise what they'd look like. Couldn't he have made anything else?
Yeah, like, he could have made a papier-mâché Tracy Island or something.
You say that, but then I've seen the new Tracy Island that's coming out, and that is quite a thing to try and render out of old bits of crap.
Yeah.
Well, there's this dramatic push near the end of the episode where Pulaski's saying, oh, he's been shot twice, so we need to get him back. And then he suddenly recovers on the Pac-led ship, and then when they beam him back, they don't beam him to sickbay, they beam him straight to the bridge, even though they're talking about having to bring him back so urgently because it's now a medical emergency.
Well, I mean, it kind of comes across more at the end that they've been farting about for Christ knows how long, and then, we've had a message. Captain Picard is close to death. Right, that's enough of the pissing about. Let's get on with it. Come on, come on!
Yeah, it's sort of a false clock. Obviously, there is an actual emergency going on, and Pulaski's the only doctor in the quadrant that can fix it. And in best traditions of Star Trek, she's the only person who can save him, because the doctor in the operating theatre over there goes, "Oh, this hasn't gone so well. I wasn't expecting complications. I'm really not qualified for this." I would have thought if you're doing heart surgery, you should probably be able to anticipate anything going wrong. And be competent enough to solve that problem. That's just my thought. I think it's quite a specialist skill.
Plus, it's an artificial heart, so wouldn't they need an engineer? What they should have done is said they needed Geordie back to fix the artificial heart, so they needed to get Geordie back from the Pac-led ship.
See, you should have been in the writer's room. You're solving all the problems here.
Incidentally, I'm 100% certain that there will be no problems and that everything will proceed completely as planned, is a line that no one has ever said in drama before a smooth procedure.
But also, when Picard's in the shuttle, he says there's a 2.4% chance of fatality. That's sort of more than 1 in 50. That doesn't seem like great odds to me if it's a routine operation.
Well, do you think there's many artificial hearts going about?
Yeah, Jonathan Colton sells quite a lot of albums. It was an album by Jonathan Colton. It featured the songs from Portal.
Now, we've completely missed out one element of the episode. Some might say the most important element, as it's the continuing development of the newest member of the Enterprise crew, Sonia Gomez.
Of course, the return of Sonia Gomez, who is walking along, chatting with Geordie. She seems to forget about him later on. But, yeah, let's talk more about her character development.
She doesn't spill some hot chocolate on Picard in this one. I like the idea that Sonia Gomez would return every episode and spill hot chocolate on Picard in increasingly incompetent ways. Like, she's drinking it in engineering and she accidentally spills it over the balcony and it lands on his head.
Or just he's on the bridge and suddenly there's just a brown patch down his front and you look up and she's on that big window at the top just cleaning it with a hot chocolate.
Or what if Sonia Gomez was doing some repairs on the transporters and she put her hot chocolate down on the panel and then accidentally transported it to above Picard on the bridge and it spilled all down him?
Or what about one time Picard just goes into his ready room and the fish tank is just full of hot chocolate.
Sonia!
So, the end of the episode, Picard wakes up, Pulaski's there, he's angry, what are you doing here? And then he's fine, and the Enterprise is fine, Geordie's fine, everything's fine, and actually not much of consequences happened, although Wesley has passed his exam and can keep being Wesley as far as we can tell. You know, if he'd failed his exam, he would have just been, left on the starbase, presumably.
Yes, all thanks to a terrible ending to the other plot with, they made Big Red Thing appear. Give up. What? Really? That's okay. Right, that's the end of that then. Wow.
Any final thoughts? Anyone? Does anyone have any thoughts? Finally.
Just like the Pack-Leads, I have no thoughts.
Well, in that case, let's move on to Quickfire.
Quickfire.
As we mentioned before, it was a reuse of a matte painting, first seen in Angel 1.
Wesley, wishing for a thing does not make it so. Did you like that? I got the catchphrase in. I got the catchphrase in!
The Crimson Force Field that Riker uses, I think, is a callback to Kirk's Corbomite maneuver, as used in the original series, twice, so they're ripping off what was already a rip-off. There's a great quote from Dennis Russell Bailey, who would go on to write an episode in Season 3. The point at which we became serious about trying to write a script for the show was about 5 minutes after watching Samaritan Snare, which in my personal opinion was the most abysmal piece of Star Trek ever filmed. My objections to it were that it always resorted to idiot plotting to make the story work, and that offended me a great deal worse than some of the awful shows which were done on the original series. Yeah, so it's good other writers realise that the writing might not quite be up to scratch.
Though the episode that he does write isn't very good, is it?
No, but he makes a fair point. I think what he's proved is that it's hard to write Star Trek.
But of course, there is one person who thought the writing was good this week.
These are the words of Maurice Hurley.
Very strange, but nice. That was very different. It gave Geordi a nice turn. And the more you use LeVar, the happier the show will be. Because LeVar is wonderful to work with.
In that case, why is he never, ever used?
Because you can't make the show too wonderful!
In 1990, Alicia Naff would go on to play the triple-breasted woman in Total Recall. Something we probably said last time she was in an episode.
Memory Alpha points out there's a very odd line in the episode when Picard begins talking about his fight, and Wesley asks, was this before the Klingons joined the Federation? That's right! As if that has any relevance to anything that's being talked about.
Plus, of course, they haven't joined the Federation. I do love the acting from Patrick Stewart when Geordi says, nice day for a little trip. The look of disdain from Picard, that is just the best acting I've ever seen and ever will see from Patrick Stewart.
That wasn't acting. He just despised LeVar Burton.
What do you think the directing note for the Pack-Leads was? Do you think we'd be able to say it today?
No.
That about sums up that episode, one of the great moments of Star Trek Next Generation. We'll be back again soon when we will be talking about Up the Long Ladder. I hope you'll climb it with us. But for now, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. They sort of suggest it's for the betterment of Wesley, with the whole, did you read the book I gave you? Well, it was a bit difficult. All the pages were stuck together and there weren't many words. It was just a lot of pictures. I know, it's good, isn't it? Do you like the way that it opened automatically onto page 45?
Why do you want Picard to be giving pornography to Wesley?
It was a long trip. All the lads together with their sandwiches.
You know, it is crazy in the future that you'd imagine that they still have printed pornography.
Well, Picard, mate, he's quite an old-fashioned sort of gentleman. Perhaps he enjoys an old-fashioned sort of pornography.
That's the other thing. Did he bring the sandwiches? It seemed to me like he'd brought the sandwiches rather than replicating the sandwiches. I mean, if there's no warp drive on it, then surely there's no replicator. So he's packed them up himself.
So, does the Enterprise computer have pornography on it?
Again, do we assume there's sort of a subspace version of the internet where you can download anything to your little pad that they carry around? Imagine your history came up while you were on duty, and these pop-ups just kept appearing, and you're like, no, I don't know how that got on there. No, I was looking at warp schematics, definitely. I don't think this is even mine.